Hello everyone, this is Professor Bob. What I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to go over the steps in installing Visual Studio. Look at the URL here. I want you to go to visualstudio.microsoft.com. This is where we are going to download a free, read it again, a free version of Visual Studio, which we're going to be using to build some Visual Basic .NET programs. Now you should see a button on here that says Free Visual Studio. So if you click on that, you're going to be presented with two options. You have the Visual Studio Community and the Visual Studio Code. And I just want to point out here that it's kind of circled my head up there because I do have an account. Microsoft might ask you to sign up for a free account. There's no credit card. If you need to do so, just do that. So after you do that, click on Visual Studio Community, and we are going to install the free Visual Studio Community Edition. Now, if you see here, I'm using Chrome, and if you look at, if you're using Chrome, you should see in your download section that you're downloading the install for Visual Studio. Now, as you can see, I got a couple of them in here, but that's fine. What I did is yesterday and the day before is I was playing with this, and so I have some additional install files here. So we're just going to let this one download, and when it's finished, give it a click, and what's going to happen is the Visual Studio setup program is going to run. Now this should take about 5 minutes or so, maybe a little bit less. Let me just move this over on my screen here. I'm using multiple screens, so it's kind of jumping around a little bit, so I apologize for that jitter. So anyway, so what's happening now is Visual Studio is downloading the setup files for the Community Edition. Now it's going to ask you to click on Continue, and that's okay. All this is going to do here is it's going to look to see if you have all the preconditions for the installation, such as the .NET framework, things of that nature. So after you give this a good read, just click on the Continue button, and we should continue with the installation. So I'm going to click on Continue, and we're going to go on from there. Now, the installation is probably going to take us, it depends on your download speed. Click Continue, and first what it's going to do is you're going to download, or it's going to download your installer. Your installer is about 23 meg or so. It shouldn't take that long to download. Again, your speeds may vary depending on if you're streaming Netflix on your Wi-Fi or whatever. So just wait till this installs and we'll take it from there. So while we're kind of waiting for this, I just want to point out again that you may have to create a Microsoft account if you don't already have one. Now, it's no big deal to do that. There's no credit card required and it's free, but you do have to deal with some spam, the marketing stuff and all that. But at the end of the day, Visual Studio, the Community Edition, the one that we're going to be using to write VB.NET programs, is free, gratis, no dinero required. So make sure that that's all taken care of so you can download this. Another thing I want to point out, kind of while we're downloading, and just to keep things moving here, is Visual Studio is the IDE that we use for Visual Basic .NET programs. Now, there's really not another real full-featured IDE to use. Remember, or maybe you don't know, that Visual Basic .NET is a proprietary language, so it really is meant to run and be developed on Visual Studio. There's, the converse is things like Java or like C++, which there's like multiple different compilers for. With VB.NET, there is some, but if you're going to be doing the visual stuff like using forms and things of that nature, you're really going to need Visual Studio. There's some, like I mentioned, there's some tweaks and some workarounds for those of you that know this pretty well, and I'm aware of that. But generally, if you're going to be doing Visual Basic .NET development, like enterprise development, i.e. for money at some organization, you're going to be using Visual Studio. And one of the things I'd like to mention too is learning Visual Studio is really its own thing too. Other than just the Visual Basic.net thing, as Visual Studio, has its own sort of learning curve. So you'll be going through that. I'm assuming since most of you, if you're taking Visual Basic.net as a first or second language, you don't really know much about Visual Studio, so you'll be learning it quickly as you go through, your course material, and you'll learn more about the IDEs and how to navigate throughout Visual Studio as you write code. So anyway, we're almost done downloading here. When you're done downloading, you're going to be presented with a screen that's going to ask you to specify, what do you really want to install. And I'll slow down a little bit. I'll let the screen kind of catch up to us. So we should see installing. Things look like they're running good. No error messages yet. And this is exactly what we want to see. So the install is going just peachy, just really, really smooth. So when this is done, we're going to choose what we want to install. For the series, or for what I'm doing here, is we're going to go in for a very, very basic install. More about that in a second. It's going to be, you're going to need at least 2 or 3 gig of space to get this working, either on on your C drive or like on another drive. So I'm gonna just go over install. We're not gonna put in any toys, bells or whistles, and this over here so you see what's going on. So the Visual Basic Installer will tell you, A, it's getting things ready. It's going in your system. It's doing things such as gathering your statistics from Windows, your version. It's getting to know about your PC or your laptop, how much memory you have, what operating system patches you have. It looks at things such as the .NET framework and what you may have installed there and what you might need to install, things of that nature. So give it a few minutes, and if it's doing this for more than 10 minutes, you're probably got a problem, but it's a good time to get yourself a cold beverage, or back in the old days, we used to take smoke breaks, but we really don't do that now anymore, right? Anyway, so just wait till this is done, and then we're going to go through the regular install. I do want to point out, too, that for the purpose of what we're going to be doing, or I'm going to be doing with you, is we're going to be using a Windows laptop. If you have Macs, there are resources out there, but you're kind of on your own in getting it to actually work. I can help as much as I can, but I can only take it so far. Anyway, we want to do the .NET Desktop Development Framework here. And I'm gonna put in all this other sort of bloatware. You can if you want. You might need some of this stuff, but we really don't. And if you remove it, it's just going to remind you, hey, do you really need this? Yeah, we do. It's kind of optional. Like I said, if you really want these things, fine. But I don't have the disk for it, so I'm just going to do just a simple install. And after you're done doing the .NET Desktop Development Framework, click on Install. Now, that went quickly, but I did click on Install. Now, at this point, the installation is occurring, and it's going to take a while. It's going to be at least 1.25 gig, and even if you got some pretty good bandwidth, it's going to take a little while to do because you're not really downloading it at bandwidth speed. Depending on what's going on, like you might have your virus software that's actually looking at your download while you're streaming it to make sure there's no bugs in it, which would slow it down. And you're also going off of a community server, which is going to serve this a little bit slowly. So I'm really going to stop my instruction here, because if you got this far, you're good. You just wait 10 minutes, 5 minutes, an hour, what have you, and then you just go through the final setup. And there's just a few things that you click on. If you see no error messages, you're fine. So go through this, and once you get to this point, just wait, and then you can finish the setup. And I'm not going to do that here because we're going to wait forever. All right, thank you. Have a good day.